Now is the time of Professor Jordal from Copenhagen. He's going to talk about corneal infections.
So, thank you very much for allowing us to speak here in India. Um, I think there's quite a big difference between the types of microbial keratitis what we see around the world. I come from Denmark, a tiny small country in the northern part of Europe here. And in Europe, we mainly see the red dots here is the place where there have been incidence studies. The blue squares, that's where bacterial keratitis is predominant. While here in India, in Southeast Asia, it's mainly fungal keratitis. So I will talk mainly about bacterial keratitis. So if we look upon risk factors for bacterial keratitis, there's an old study here from John Dart, a casualty-based control study, and he found that contact lens wearers are 80 times more likely, and those with ocular trauma are 14 times more likely to develop an episode of microbial keratitis than non-contact lens wearers who has known predisposing factors. Later on, this has probably been reduced a bit, but Stapleton from Australia found that the unadjusted incidence rate of corneal infection is of the order of 5 to 10 times higher in contact lens wearers. So contact lenses, that is certainly a risk factor. What else do we see as risk factors? Various kinds of ocular surface disease. These are two terrible cases here, one with neuroprosthetic cornea, one with ocular cicatricial pemphigoid. But I think today we also see new risk factors for bacterial keratitis. That can be autokeratology in children. Children rarely develop bacterial keratitis, but we have seen cases with auto-K use in children and grown-ups where people have developed bacterial keratitis. Also after corneal cross-linking, you can see bacterial keratitis. So what do we see in Europe typically? Well, if you look upon the world here, bacteria, that is 92% of the microbial keratitis cases, Acanthamoeba, something like 3%, and fungi, something like 4 or 5%. So it is bacteria we see most. And what types of bacteria do we see? Well, Pseudomonas keratitis, this is many years ago in our clinic. 18 hours after symptom start, the patient was a contact lens user. She showed up on our university eye clinic, and it looked like Pseudomonas. She was put into treatment at once with relevant antimicrobial therapy, and then it went by after 2 days, 4 days, actually progressive worsening, then a tendency for improvement, but after 3 weeks she perforated, and we had to do a penetrating keratoplasty in her. So Pseudomonas is definitely still a significant cause of very severe keratitis. Gram-negative bacteria, they are associated typically with contact lens wear. We have Pseudomonas as a good example. We can also, with increasing incidence, see patients, elderly patients with ocular surface disease with the Moraxella species or Serratia marcescens, and I took this picture with a nice colonies of Serratia shown here. The gram-positive bacteria we see, they are typically associated with ocular surface disease, and that's well-known Staphylococcus aureus, pneumococci, and coagulase-negative Staphylococcus. We do see fungi also, and this is a very severe case we saw a few years ago. In the UK, they have made a bigger study here in 2021, where they tried to look on all the fungal keratitis cases they could get hold of, and it was dominated by Candida species, Fusarium species, Aspergillus species, and topical treatment included voriconazole, natamycin, amphotericin B, and tectonic keratopolis was necessary in 25% of the cases, while 50% of these keratoplasties failed. Another study from the UK, fungal keratitis in London over 10 years, 2016, where they observed an increasing incidence of, let's see where the arrow goes, over years here from 1994 up to 2014, and increase in filamentary keratitis, and we have seen the same in Denmark. Then we have Acanthamiba as well. A nice picture. It's not so often you can really see perineural infiltrates. Also a study from the UK, very big, with 86,000 patients with microbial keratitis. Out of these, 5,600 had Acanthamiba keratitis, and it is a rare disease. I mean, you can assume that you will see approximately 2 eyes with Acanthamiba per healthcare unit center per year. They couldn't see a difference between continents with of patients with Acanthamiba keratitis, and the ratio of eyes with Acanthamiba to the total number of eyes with microbial keratitis was 1 to 2%. So it is a rare disease, but we see it. And I know Frank Larkin will tell more later today about this. And what do we do? Well, when patient shows up, we take samples directly on the plates. It's time consuming, and unfortunately still gives no clinical useful results in up to 50%. So many times we have to rely on our clinical observations and actually choose a very broad spectrum antibiotics. Same is the case with staining methods, where you rarely get a clear diagnosis. And why is this? Because obviously the patient has an infection with bacteria, and it can be related to prior antibiotic use. It can be difficult to grow organisms from small samples, and there can be challenges to immediate incubation of culture plates to optimize diagnostic yield. PCR is used routinely, but it's mainly, and you have various types of PCR, quantitative and multiplex, and we use it widely, and I think it's the same all over the world for Acanthamiba, because we have never have any luck with our labs growing Acanthamiba. So we use PCR for the detection, and then for the various herpes viridae. One thing more, we use confocal microscopes in many clinics. Fungal keratitis, where you can see hyphae. Actually, that's typically what we use. We use it also in Acanthamiba keratitis, but it's more difficult, and you really have to have sort of those using the microscope should have quite some experience. And as it is a very rare disease, Acanthamiba keratitis, we never in even big university clinics in Denmark get this expertise, but we use it and try. What do we do? Well, antibiotic therapy, we have touched upon that. The first and second generation fluoroquinolones, that's ciprofloxacin and ofloxacin, has a good activity against gram-negative bacteria, reasonable activity against most gram-positive bacteria. It was used in the 1990s. Then third and fourth generation fluoroquinolones were introduced in the 2000s, still with a broader spectrum activity against gram-positive bacteria, but less effective against Pseudomonas. And some still use dual therapy, drops vancomycin for gram-positive, fluoroquinolone or aminoglycoside, for example, gentamicin for gram-negative copper. What about resistance? It's a problem in general with antibiotics. If we see here for the negatives, fluoroquinolone is here, aminoglycosides and cephalosporin here. So it looks like fluoroquinolones is a good selection choice for gram-negative all over the world. Although here in Asia it can be a problem. What about gram-positives? Fluoroquinolones still effective in most cases. Aminoglycosides also. Cephalosporin is about similar in the UK. So what do we do? And just a comment upon microbial resistance. I think, or people that knows more about this than I do, is that overuse, misuse, and the indiscriminate use of antibiotics in agriculture are thought to be the key drivers for antimicrobial resistance. So that was to consider. Antifungal therapy, natamycin is the only commercial available drug in Europe. It's not EMA approved, but you can get it. Otherwise, we have to rely on pharmacy, prepared drops, amphotericin B, and voriconazole. And topical antiamoebal therapy, I'm sure Frank Larkin will talk more about that. Chlorhexidine, polyhexanide, and propamidine. And then the study recently published, there's a protocol there. So should you use steroids in microbial keratitis? There have been some meta-analysis, randomized studies. These groups summarized 4 studies and no found any important difference between topical corticosteroid or placebo for reduction in ulcer size, etc. So I think, at least that's our belief, that in general steroids should be withheld until the clinician is confident that it is unlikely that any visible pathogenic bacteria or if revitalization has occurred. And we never use it in fungal keratitis, and maybe on the long run it has a place in Acarnidina. Finally, just touch upon other treatment modalities. PAX-CXL, photoactive thrombophores, can be done. Aminda and Toft and others have commented on this. It may be an additional option for bacterial keratitis refractory to medical therapy. We look forward to a large US study that is going to present their results this year. Finally, amniotic membrane, meta-analysis again from Ting, and just summarizing that amniotic membrane may serve as a useful adjuvant therapy improving corneal healing and visual outcome. Future, next generation sequencing, we have tried that. Today it does not work, it does not help us. Artificial and deep learning may help still, but still not routine practice. So, conclusion, keratitis in Europe, bacterial keratitis is most common. Filamentary and Acarnidina are rare but increasing. Ciprofloxacin is often preferred for first-time treatment. So with this, just wish you a good meeting, and this is our hospital in Denmark. Thank you.